Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll start. Welcome to the Cheltenham Borough Planning Committee, being held on Thursday, the 22nd of May, 2025. My name is Councillor Garth Barnes, and I'm chair of the committee. The meeting is being streamed live to Cheltenham Borough Council's YouTube channel, and the recording of the meeting will be held for 4 years. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any issues are resolved. If you are here to make a representation to the meeting, you are consulting to the use of the sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. Please be aware that CCTV and audio recording is now in operation in the public gallery, and the recordings will be held by the Council for 5 months. Please note, a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, you should immediately make your way to the nearest exit. So the first item we have is apologies, and we have no apologies received, so we're a full house. 2 announcements I'd like to make. One is that Councillor Paul Baker, who used to be the vice chair of this committee and the chair at some points, has now left us. And I forgot at the last meeting that it was his last meeting. So I would just like to place on record my grateful thanks for all he did for planning over the years. And he will be sadly missed because he was a very good member of this planning committee. So I'd just like that to be recorded for the minutes. And as far as that's concerned, we now have to have a new vice chairman. And I appear to have to recommend the appointment of Frank Allen, Councillor Frank Allen, as vice chair of the committee. And I'm assuming that nobody is going to object to that. So I would like to welcome you as the new vice chairman of the committee. And I know that we will work well together in the future. Welcome on board, Frank. It does say that we will take a vote by show of hands. I suppose I ought to do that. If it says on my script that I've got to do it, I will do it. All those in favour of Frank being vice chair? That's unanimous. Thank you. So, agenda item 3 then, declarations of interest. Has anybody got any interest to declare on the meeting? No, thank you. So, item 4 is declaration of independent site visits. Has anybody, Councillor Steinhardt?
Yeah, I'd just like to declare that I did visit all the sites except Imperial Gardens, which I know well anyway, yesterday. Thank you.
Nobody else? Thank you. So, minutes of the last meeting. I've thrown water all over my bits and paper, but I've managed to miss the minutes of the last meetings. If you all agree, I will sign them as a true record. Is that approved? Thank you. Non-soggy version.
Thanks.
Thank you. Item 6, public questions. There are none, so we move on. And we take the first agenda item of the applications coming forward, which is item 7, St Edward's School, Cirencester Road, Charlton Kings. And I'd like to ask Claire if she would present it to us for us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This application relates to St Edward's School, specifically a northern parcel of the site, which includes single-storey classroom buildings and a 2-storey and single-storey gym block. The main site is accessed off Cirencester Road with an exit route via Chancel Way to the north. The site does not fall within a conservation area. However, there is a Grade 2 style listed building on site. The site shares a boundary with a number of residential properties to the north. These are properties on Chancel Way, Randolph Close and St Jude's Walk, who share a boundary with the school site. The application seeks planning permission for the demolition of 2 single-storey classroom blocks and replace with 1 larger 2-storey classroom block and a first floor extension over existing ground floor part of the gym block. Members will note from the officer report that the scheme has been revised throughout the course of the application process. The application is determined at Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Harvey, with officer's recommendation to permit subject to conditions. So we've just got the site location plan and an aerial view with the site boundary roughly outlined in red, just to show the site's boundary. We've just indicating the location of the works within the site. Here we've got the block plan on the left, showing the new outline of the classroom building and the extensions to the gym block. And then just a more zoomed in of an aerial view, just highlighting the location of the works. So I'll just run through the classroom elevations. So I've presented it to try and line up the approximate location of the existing building with the proposed building, just for a comparison. So this is the south elevation, which faces into the school site. And the north elevations, again existing and proposed. So this elevation faces the residential properties on Randolph Close and St Jude's Walk. The first floor windows on this elevation are to be fixed shut and obscure glazed. West elevation, so this also faces into the school site. And then the east elevation, which faces towards the gym block building. This is just a drawing that was submitted with the revised drawings. That just shows height comparisons of the revised scheme compared to the initially submitted scheme. So the ridge height's been reduced by 1.8 metres from 11 metres to 9.2 metres. The amount of glazing on the north facing link section has been reduced. So I've just put a snippet of the previous elevation, the link elevation, just at the top right, just to compare the design. The internal layout has been amended to have the classrooms facing into the school site, with the corridor facing north towards the residential properties. And again, all windows on the first floor north elevation will be obscure glazed and fixed shut. And that's required by a suggested condition. So these are the existing and proposed floor plans. So this is the revised plan, just the internal layout's been swapped around, so the corridor at the north with the classrooms facing south. And then moving on to the gym building, so the existing and proposed front elevation. The first floor extension will be predominantly glazed, and it includes fenestration alterations at ground floor. And then the rear elevation, existing and proposed. Similar design to the front with the use of glazing. And then the existing and proposed ground floor of the gym block. The minor alterations are proposed at ground floor, which includes a small increase in floor area. And then the first floor plan, just to show the new floor space to be created, which shows a gym and a cafe and other services. So I'll just run through a few photos for context. I've just put in a 3D Google aerial image. So this is taken from the north of the site, looking towards the proposed development. And you can see the residential properties of Randolph Close at the bottom. And these are just some photos taken from within the site. So at the top is the classroom blocks, and then the bottom is the gym block. It's hard to take a photo, so I've just popped in a Google aerial 3D image just to show the gym block. And then just some photos taken from number 2 Randolph Close. So there's a few there from within the property and the garden, and then a couple from the site looking back towards Randolph Close. So the top right photo is one of the buildings to be demolished and replaced. So that's standing what would be behind the replacement building. So the key considerations for this application, so design, the design of the buildings are considered to be acceptable and sink comfortably within the school setting. More modern finish is proposed using timber cladding, render, zinc roof for the classroom and timber cladding and glazing to the gym block. The impact on designated heritage assets. A building within the site is listed. The council's conservation officer has assessed the potential harm and has concluded that the proposals would not impact upon the setting or character of the listed building. Impact on neighbouring amenity. The impact on amenity has been assessed, taking into consideration neighbour representations. No concerns have been raised by officers with regards to the gym block. Obviously, there was revised drawings submitted for the classroom block. The revised scheme has been assessed and the building does achieve the required 21-metre window-to-window distance, which achieving 29 metres, passes the relevant light test. The officers acknowledged that residents of the neighbouring properties will see the new building. However, the harm, when weighed against policies, is not considered to be to an unacceptable level. And finally, sustainable development. A sustainability statement has not been submitted with the application. However, it's acknowledged that the new building would be more energy efficient than the existing buildings, which are in poor condition. So officer's recommendation is to therefore permit this application for the reasons set out within the officer's report, subject to the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. So we have two public speakers, an objector and the ward member. You both have 5 minutes to speak, and I will be very strict on the timing of that, and I will give you a reminder 30 seconds before you come to the end of your 5 minutes spot. Thank you, Claire. So two public speakers, an objector and the ward member. You both have... Little Sir Echo. So, hopefully, gosh, that's put me off. So, can I ask Mr. Howard Ganderton as the objector to come forward, please? And as I say, you have 5 minutes, and I'll start timing from when you speak.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here today representing the residents of Randolph Close and St Jude's Walk to object to this application. The planning officer's report suggests our concerns have been noted and the revisions have been made. They sadly don't go far enough. The fundamental issues raised remain unresolved, and in our view, they constitute material planning objections that require this application to be refused. The proposed classroom block is 9.2 metres high and 47 metres long, standing at 5.2 metres higher than the existing single-storey buildings that are set for demolition, which we currently see above our wall. Crucially, the building also sits on elevated ground, about 1.5 metres higher, making it 2 metres taller than the average two-storey home. This means it will tower around 4 metres above our properties, and at 47 metres long, the 21-metre separation rule feels meaningless in its context. The report suggests the build is in keeping with the character of the development, as there are multiple two-storey buildings in the vicinity. This, with respect, is misleading, as seen here on the north side, near the residential homes, where the proposed building is to be built. They are single-storey, lower level to respect the lie of the land and residents nearby, as are the buildings set for demolition. The report states that light pollution has been raised multiple times. However, without resolve, this remains a serious concern. There's been no attempt to soften this build with any form of screening. I'd like to point out that the recent build of Leckhampton High, which sits comfortably in its location, surrounded by trees and a flat, eco-friendly roof, in this report, states the lack of green credentials is unfortunate. This is surely unacceptable in 2025. The school's heritage statement fails to mention that bordering our home is a 200-plus-year-old wall. The officer's report relies on the assumption that the impact of light will be minimal. This picture helps demonstrate how the new building will block sunlight into our homes during the winter months. The school's owner of the owner of Alpha Schools visited our home to see the impact for himself, and he seemed very open to suggestions of lowering this build. It's worth noting that despite the school's many attempts to raise support through emails, coffee mornings, only one response was ever generated on support. Pictures 11 and 12 demonstrates the vulnerability of students in this locality and from the safe environment on the south side of the school. Before I close, I urge the committee to ask, does this proposal really comply with the policies it claims to meet? Policy SD14, Policy SL1. In conclusion, this is our home and was meant to be our forever home. It's what I've been going to work for every day, and if you as committee members were faced with similar prospects, how would you feel? This building does not sit comfortably in the proposed space. We as residents want St Edward's to progress, provide better working environments and keep the students safe. But we strongly believe this can and should be achieved without ruining the lives and homes of neighbouring residents. Our mental health and well-being must also be considered. We deserve to feel safe and relaxed in our homes, not overshadowed by a dominating structure looming above us. This build can't be packed away after the school day finishes. The height of this building could be significantly reduced. This would go a long way to resolving some of the amenity issues. So may I take this opportunity to thank the committee members for listening to our case. Naturally, I would ask you to support us and refuse this application. However, if refusal is not supported, then I respectfully ask and beg that this application be deferred so that meaningful discussions can take place, particularly around height. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ganderson. Well within your 5 minutes, thank you. Can I ask Councillor Harvey, as the ward councillor, to come and speak? And you're aware of the 5 minutes.
Stop the clock. Chairman, thank you for the coaching. Committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. This submission would have benefited from pre-application advice from CBC, but the applicant failed to seek any, which is very interesting in itself. I would like you all to consider, please, refusing this application for the following planning policy reasons. JCS policy SD3 Sustainable Design and Construction states that any development must demonstrate how it will contribute to the aims of sustainability and be expected to be adaptable to climate change in respect of design, layout, siting, orientation and function. The Cheltenham Climate Change Supplementary Planning Directive, which was adopted in June 2022, sets out a strategy for decarbonising buildings over the next decade. Key points in that SPD say that the SPD should be at the heart of the planning process. It's not been used here. And furthermore states that how successful applicants align with the CPD will be a material consideration in the determination of planning applications by the local planning authority. As a council, we are serious about the climate emergency, and mitigation that this authority is putting in place needs to be supported across all council areas, especially planning. The report states that this submission has not included any details or information as to how the building would meet the aims of the council by way of the inclusion of low carbon features and technologies. The lack of a sustainability statement is unfortunate. I think that's actually being quite generous. This is too large a submission to not take into account this supplementary planning advice. I think it also fails JCS policy SD14, health and environmental equality, in that development must protect the amenity of existing and future users and residents, including in terms of light, privacy, outlook, noise and air quality. This proposal fails to protect the amenity of the neighbouring residents, not helped by, of course, being on higher ground, and then it's going to be even higher. It introduces a 9.2 metre high, 47 metre long mass within metres of gardens and windows. Increased noise pollution from funnelled children student movement every 45 minutes, the loss of light and outlook caused by the bulk of this building on the raised land, and a profound negative impact on mental well-being, an element that SD14 explicitly aims to safeguard. This is not a minor infringement, it's a wholesale loss of residential amenity, but for the families most affected and reflects negatively in a grade 2 star setting. Local Plan Policy SL1, Safe and Sustainable Living, development should not cause unacceptable harm to the amenity of adjoining land users or the surrounding neighbourhood, including in terms of noise, privacy, daylight. You've heard it before. This building dominates a quiet residential setting and introduces school-scale infrastructure in the tightest, most sensitive part of the site. The scale and massing are completely out of character with surrounding two-storey homes. The proximity and elevation worsen this effect, of course, on daylight and sense of enclosure, especially for garden use. I'm sure you saw that on Planning View when you were there on Tuesday. And the sense of visual intrusion and skyline loss are highly damaging and create a perception of being boxed in, which is a clear breach of amenity protection under SL1. Where are we? Okay, sorry, last page. MPPF section 12, achieving well-designed places. Plans should ensure that developments are sympathetic to local character. I don't think it is. Create places within a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. Refuse development of poor design that fails to reflect local context or causes significant harm. This proposal does fail to reflect local character. Its bulk, scale and mass are alien in a domestic residential setting. Amenity is reduced, not enhanced, particularly in terms of visual dominance, noise and light pollution. There's no genuine alternative layouts or meaningful mitigation. Green roof, reduced western mass have been explored, which amounts to a failure of thoughtful contextual design, which I think if they'd come for pre-planning advice, they might have been persuaded otherwise to submit slightly different plans. As per para 134, development of poor design that fails to take the opportunities available for improving the character improvement and equality of an area should be refused. I urge the committee to ask yourselves, and
30 seconds.
be mindful of what Mr. Gansden just said, to ask yourself whether this scheme genuinely reflects a fair, balanced and respectful planning so close to a residential community. There are no other two-storey buildings on that side of the school. They've all been kept away from the housing, so why does that not apply here? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. So, are there any questions from members? Gosh, hands all over the place. I saw you first, and then Barbara, and then Frank, and then... Oh, you, sorry, Tony.
Yes, on Planning View, we discussed the height of the telegraph pole that was presumably going to be moved for the building. Did we manage to get a height and the comparison between that and the height of the building? Because I think that would be quite relevant. There's another question, I can't think what it was now. But
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it will be an approximate guesstimate of the height. So it looked about half the height of the mast was about halfway up the pitch of the roof. So I've measured the height of half the pitch of the existing roof, which was 3.7 metres. So it's approximately double, just slightly more. So I would say the height of the mast was approximately 8 metres. So the building would be a further 1.2 metres higher than that to the ridge. Yeah. Yeah, so it was a good reference point, wasn't it, when we were on site?
Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chair. I would suggest we could park the gym extension because I don't think it impacts on the neighbouring. But frankly, I don't like the architectural style of any of this build. But the question I have is, why are they not putting solar panels on? I'm surprised that they say it's a sustainable building, but there are no solar panels. I wonder if the officers spoke to them about that.
Yeah, so a sustainability statement wasn't submitted with the application. They do make reference in their submission that the replacement of the existing buildings with a more energy efficient building contributes to that. But yeah, no, we didn't enter into any negotiations in terms of adding any sort of low carbon technologies to the building as part of the application.
Is it triple glazed, for example? No.
We don't have those specific details at this stage. I have added a condition for materials. We could always add a condition that window details are submitted as well to get that confirmation of exactly if it's going to be double, triple glazed windows to be added.
Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Chair. How far will the extension of the classrooms affect school places? I mean, how many more students could we expect to host at the school with the extension versus without?
Thank you. Yeah, so it's been confirmed that there would be no additional pupils to the school. The reason for the building, albeit it's not in the submission, it has been confirmed to me that there's classrooms within the listed building that aren't suitable. So those would be displaced into the new classroom block, because there is an additional, I think it's 5 classrooms to be added compared to proposed. So yeah, there'll be no additional pupils, and it's just to, allows for more flexibility to the teaching timetable and to allow classrooms that are in poor condition to move out.
Councillor Oliver?
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 points. Can the planning officer just confirm that there was no pre-app discussions? I mean, reading this, it talks about the plans having been revised following initial submission. And the second point was, is it correct that there was no objection from the parish council?
Yeah, no, there was no pre-app submission. So the initial scheme is the first that I saw of it. The revisions were, so yeah, I went back to them, set out concerns that it could be reduced in height, the classrooms looking over, the changing of the layout. So the suggestions that were made by officers were done by the applicants. And then, let me just double check consultation responses. Yeah, so no objection raised by the parish council.
Okay. Councillor Bamford?
So my first question would be, is there any reason not to condition measures designed to reduce the carbon footprint, such as solar panels? And I suppose, yeah, maybe that's my main point. If you could answer that, that'd be great.
Because they're not proposing anything, we couldn't ask them to include it as part of a condition. We couldn't add a condition to say you need to submit details of sort of low carbon technology they're going to include, because they haven't shown those on the drawings to be included. So in short, no, we couldn't.
Sorry, you got a supplementary? Please.
I mean, the vast majority of proposals that come here do have those sorts of measures addressed. It's a great pity that we haven't addressed them in some way. Either they've had the discussions and they don't want to go ahead with them, that's what's before us, or we've had the discussions and they're prepared to go along with it. It doesn't feel satisfactory to me that we are in this position without having had those discussions. So I'm concerned that we are and would query why we've got to this point, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steinhardt?
Yes, just a thought when one of the objectors was talking about screening between the building and the actual residential area. And I was trying to imagine the height of the wall, I'm sure it's mentioned, and whether any screening could be done, or whether it's the fact that to wait for a tree to get that high would be a very long time, but I just wondered about screening.
So I have added a condition for landscaping details, because there are a few sort of shrubs, probably low-scale shrubs in sort of the area where the link would go. So any details would be included in that. It's unlikely that they would add any screening, I'd suggest, on the boundary, because they do have parking spaces along that boundary wall. But yeah, I mean, we've assessed it as it is, and we don't feel that screening is necessary there, but there would be a landscaping scheme which they'll need to, you know, if it was approved, apply to discharge, and we would determine if that was acceptable or not.
Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, I remember my other question. And in the gentleman that's objecting, in his letter of objection, he did mention light pollution, particularly lights on at night, particularly winter time, and even left on all night. If this does get passed, can we put in a condition, and I'm not going to sort of suggest a time, but a time when all lights should be switched off, apart from perhaps a security light?
Yeah, I did touch on this within the officer report. So we can't control internal lighting. That's not something that planning can control or can enforce. A condition is suggested for external lighting details to be submitted. So any new external lighting that is proposed on the building would need to be submitted to and agreed by the council prior to installation.
Then can we at least have an informative goes on that after a time, I don't know, 9 o'clock if they've got evening classes, that lights should be turned off and not left on all night?
Yeah, I have put an informative on about just drawing attention to light spill from inside the buildings. I haven't added a time, but it's an encouragement to be considerate of named properties, because obviously getting, you know, at first floor would be much different to just those single stories. So that there is an informative on there just to highlight to the applicant.
Councillor Clark, another question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'd like to take that further, if it's possible, if the officer could consider, if you have a motion triggered light, and they can get stuck, I speak from personal experience, it's terrible to have that coming into your bedroom. So could we make sure they're not facing onto the properties, because that really is dreadful, light pollution. Thank you.
I'll just come back on that. So yeah, the details of any external lighting would need to be submitted. So that's the location and where they're directed to would be considered as part of those details.
No other questions at this stage? Councillor Steinhardt, yes?
Sorry, it was just a concern about a two-storey building and accessibility and disabilities with no lift, particularly for a school. And I just wondered about whether that was a provision that could be put in. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I did touch on it in the report. So it would be sort of building control that would be covered under. There are classrooms obviously at ground floor to provide sort of accessible classrooms, but yeah, it was noted that there was no internal lift. But it was acknowledged that there are sufficient sort of ground floor classrooms that could accommodate accessible access.
Okay, so open to member for debate now then. Any member? Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Chair. I am of the mind to speak against this application. I think while the officer's report does make some convincing points regarding it being compliant with planning policy, I do think when it's viewed in reality, when it's seen in reality in context to the houses, I think it falls short. I think ultimately the attempts to add informatives and conditions to this application are like trying to put sellotape on the Titanic. I think there's a lot that needs to be discussed before this is approved. And while we could say we would defer this, there are parts of this application that I don't find acceptable. For example, like Councillor Steinhardt touched on, the fact that there is no provision for lifts within the school blocks for students with disabilities, the fact that a sustainability report hasn't been included. I think it shows disregard for the process, and I think there needs to be significantly more consideration given for this application before it goes back to committee. So I am of the mind to reject, and I would hope fellow councillors on the committee would agree.
Councillor, are you suggesting a deferral at this stage?
No, Chair, I'm suggesting rejection.
Rejection.
And the scheme is revised.
I thought you said it should be referred for more discussion.
No, sorry, to clarify, I said it should not be deferred for more discussion.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Wheeler? Sorry, Tony.
Okay, fine. I think as far as the appearance, yes, there is, particularly we saw from upstairs windows, there would be quite significant difference in view. Based on what we said, I think the telegraph pole, although we had the telescopic pole that the objector put up, because it was closer right to the wall, I didn't think it was as relative as the telegraph pole, which was actually where the building was. I do feel that from the garden, the building would be very little of the building that would be seen, albeit, as I say, from bedroom windows, it would be quite significant. And yes, I would agree it was not particularly good, but I think that we are constantly told that nobody has the right to a view, which is something that maybe we don't like, but it is planning law. So I think the appearance, I don't think it could be classed as overbearing, albeit if I was living there with the view that is there and the view that was going to be there, I wouldn't particularly like it. But, we can't. I don't feel that that is a planning objection that we could use, and I think on that we would lose. Though the objections to perhaps the sustainability, which is something that we have argued about for some time in this committee, asking developers to build more sustainable buildings, and a lot of new developers do actually come up first time round with solar panels, heat pumps and all that sort of thing. And, I just feel that there has not been enough effort. So I'm a little bit torn on this one. I don't think we could use the appearance of the building as an objection. I don't know how strong our objection would be on sustainability, but I would like to perhaps reject it and go back for something, see if we can push for a little bit more in the way of sustainability, i.e. solar panels, heat pumps, etc., etc.
Councillor Oliver?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, with every planning application, there's always winners and losers. I mean, the point on this is there is a certain loss of amenity, but is it acceptable or unacceptable? I think we'd have great difficulty. I've got great difficulty in turning this application down. It's not ideal. We haven't got everything we want, but does it follow the rules? And As Councillor Wheeler said, no one's entitled to a view, they're entitled to light. This gives the light. I feel very sorry for the residents, but I can't turn this down.
Councillor Clark, and I'll get you in a second.
If you would indulge me, I do get a bit fed up with applications that start asking for this and then drop the height as if they're giving us a gift. And then I think it's too imposing. And I would like to hear what Councillor Allen suggests as a reason for objecting. I think they could have sunk the building. They could have done something beautiful as it is, something more streamlined. It's not architecturally pleasing. Okay, people outside won't see it, and it would be, if it were beautiful, putting lipstick on a gorilla, frankly, because nothing around it is very beautiful to look at. But with the sellotape on the Titanic and the lipstick on the gorilla, what I'm thinking about is, would I want that? I don't think it had to be that high. I don't agree that it had to be that high. That ugly, fine. That's not my taste. But I think the lack of detail, the fact that it starts up here and goes down there, we've seen that countless times. I just want to make that point. Maybe we sort of look stupid, but I'm not stupid enough to think that moving something down means it becomes acceptable. And if Councillor Allen can give me a jolly good legal reason, I will join him in turning this down.
Councillor Bamford.
Thank you. I'd welcome a view from the officers about the sustainability, from our point of view, of a rejection on the basis of disabled access to the second floor and the lack of a sustainability report. Are either of those two grounds something that we would likely succeed should the applicant take it further? Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Oliver, you are right to say that the loss of view does not constitute a material planning consideration, but the loss of privacy does. And if there is a loss of privacy that is substantial, then there is legal grounds for refusal. And I'm just scouring through the NPPF looking for a reason, as Councillor Clark is asking me to do, but I think we can cite our own joint core strategy, SD14, paragraph 2, clause 1, as being a substantial ground for refusal on the grounds of immunity in relation to privacy as well. I think there are significant flaws to this application. And like you said, Councillor Clark, I don't think it had to be that height. Given it's not adding any extra places for school children, given it's doing very little minus adding extra classrooms, adding extra classrooms, amending, upgrading the classrooms, which could be done in other ways that don't include overshadowing neighbourhood properties, I am still minded to refuse. And while it is a shame with the gym property building that is being refused, because, I have a lot of support for bringing a cafe into schools, extending physical education centres, I do think the classrooms are sufficient grounds to refuse this altogether.
Thank you. Unfortunately, you weren't able to get to the planning view, but those of us who were there could see the situation from the upper story of the properties, and that was where the view was obstructed. I have to say that I don't think there was any question of any privacy being challenged at that point. I don't think that's been a concern of the residents. I think the building is quite far away, and then from the garden point of view, it would not be possible to see the roof of the new building. So just overshadowing and privacy, I think, is a little bit dangerous to use as a reason for rejection, because I think we would find that the inspector would challenge us quite strongly on those grounds. Councillor,
With respect, Chair, I'm afraid I do think the new roof would be very visible from the garden. I do think the roof would be visible from the garden. I'd like to ask the officer to.
I think unfortunately we're here to review the application that's in front of us. We're not here to, as many of us would like on occasion, to redesign the buildings.
Pardon. I think you would see the roof from the garden. I think you would. No?
Sorry, yes, you would probably see the roof because that would be blocking the view of the escarpment they have at the moment.
I understood you to say it won't be visible from the garden. I think you will see the ridge from the garden. No?
From my perspective, when I was there, I don't think it would have, but I can be challenged on that, I'm sure. I don't know if other members who were there would have found that situation. Councillor Bamford?
I'm with you, Garth. I did look at that, and for me, it would be if it was visible, it would only be in a very small way. However, from the first floor, it would be very visible, but it is the roof we're talking about. So your points about privacy are compelling. I can't see how we can possibly object on those grounds. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, I was just going to agree with what you were saying. From the garden, from the lawn, the height of the wall wouldn't. I mean, there was trees there that would have been higher than the building, and you could barely see the tops of the trees. So I think from the garden you wouldn't, but obviously from the windows it would be.
Any other Councillor Oliver?
Yeah, just to re-emphasise, the first floor windows are obscured.
Councillor Allen?
Sorry, you might get sick of me speaking at this point, but I'm really fighting my case. I do take your points on loss of privacy, and I appreciate that. While I was not on view due to travel, I respect the views of members, and so I take on board the comments about privacy and redact the challenge based on privacy. But I would say we still need to challenge it on the lack of amenability for people with disabilities. I think there's a case to be made that really should have been considered, especially for young people, where options are more limited. When you are teaching, when you're providing such a core service as education, that they should have access to the classrooms on the top floor. And without that being included, well, I know the officer's report does suggest that, it's not necessarily a stumbling block. I do think there should be serious consideration given to that before it's brought back to committee again.
Thank you. Just bear with me.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify for committee, internal sort of accessibility issues are matters that are entirely controlled by the building regulations. So those matters are not planning issues, and so they can't be used as a reason for refusal or indeed a reason for granting permission. They're simply not relevant to a planning application. Chair.
I have to say that was what my thoughts were. Are you proposing rejection on SD 14 then? And are you?
Yes, I think that's the only case I've got left.
Can you say specifically on SD 14 what the objection is that you have?
Yeah, and I think it goes down to the minutiae which Councillor Oliver hinted on, which is I would consider it to be unacceptable harm to local amenity. I think other members may disagree and say it is, I hate to say it, but acceptable harm to local amenity. I would say we should still object because it is unacceptable.
Sorry to be pedantic, but can you specify what particular harm you see?
For me, it would be the overriding effect of light pollution. I would say it's also the the overriding effect of the, well, not the view, but the height of the buildings in comparison to the wall?
I do have to take the officer's recommendation first. If that fails, then we will take your proposal for rejection on those grounds. So if everybody is ready to participate in a vote, we will go to that. We'll do it online, are we? Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah, do you want to come back? Sorry, yes, I think the officers feel it's been answered the questions, so we will go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. So it's 5. Oops. Thank you very much. We're a split vote, 5 for and 5 against. So that, and no abstentions. So that does mean that I have to use my chairman's prerogative for the casting vote. And as I voted for initially, I'm going to stay with the 4. So that makes it 6-5 for the application to be permitted. So I'm sorry, your resolution is not taken and the application is approved. Okay. Thank you. So we move swiftly on then to item 7B, which is Cheviot Road, Prestbury. Are you doing this one?
I'll do this one. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. This is an application to retrofit external wall insulation, which will then be over-rendered to 2 houses in Cheviot Road and 15 houses in Pennine Road. The application is before committee this evening because the council is the applicant. So these are the relevant properties. We can see 2 properties in Cheviot Road and 15 in Pennine, as I said. You will see that they are all semi-detached properties. In some cases, however, the insulation is proposed to 1/2 or only 1/2 of the pair, whereas in other cases, it's both. So here we have elevations showing the existing situation and the proposed elevations. The existing at the top, where there's at first floor level some typically metal cladding. And then at the bottom of the drawing here, the proposed elevations, so you can see that post application of the insulation, the buildings will be rendered. Now, I don't have photographs of all of the properties, but just to give a general idea of the existing and proposed situations, you can see on this photograph here, one of the properties that hasn't yet had the work done to it. You can see the neighbour next door has had something similar done in the past. So the proposed houses will have the appearance of the property to the right there. And moving on to some other properties in the street, you can see this central property is obviously a property which hasn't had the insulation fitted, but there are examples in the immediate vicinity of properties that have had something similar done. And again, we can see one of the properties. This is one of the properties that the works will be undertaken to. So that will be fitted with insulation and over-rendered. So the key planning matters are design, impact on amenity and sustainability. The recommendation is to permit with condition of the standard condition of the time limit and compliance with the approved plans. In terms of the planning issues, the proposed insulation works are obviously welcomed in terms of sustainability and are acceptable in design terms. And in addition, there were no amenity concerns raised. So as I say, Chair, the recommendation is to grant permission.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. We have no public speakers. Any questions from members? No? Oh, Councillor Stiles?
Yes, just to clarify, is that all the buildings associated with CBC in that area, or are there some still left without the plans to be done?
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is there are some others in the vicinity, but the works are being done in phases. But this is the current phase that's proposed at the moment.
Councillor Wheeler?
Just very briefly, I know there's a number of properties in my ward that have had this work done, and I'm aware that the insulation properties are much better than what's there previously. So the only thing that gives me some cause of concern, and I don't know if it's been changed since I've noticed that there is only a very thin scrim of hard material on the outside, and they do get damaged quite easily. That's certainly not going to give me any reason to object to it, but it might be something that wants to be thought of. As I say, it's like plaster on top of foam, and it can be damaged quite easily.
So that wasn't a question. That was a comment, basically. Okay, I'm still on questions at the moment. Thank you. No other questions, the officers? No. So we are on member debate, so I'll take your comment as a part of the member debate. Thank you. Any other member? No. We'll hopefully go to the vote then on this one. All those in favour, please show. All those against? So we are unanimously for that one. So thank you very much indeed. That is approved. We now move on to the next item, which is Fairley, Sandy Lane. I'll ask Victoria if she'll introduce it for us, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant is seeking planning permission to raise the roof to create a first floor level within the new roof. Associated external alterations are proposed, which include new windows and doors, metal clad canopy, render and composite cladding. So the first slide we have is the site location plan, showing the location of the site and the surrounding neighbours. Then we have a photo of the building from the street and a photo of the dwelling within the site. Then we have a Google image showing the building and the surrounding neighbouring properties. And then we've got the proposed block plan. To note, the proposed development is to increase the height of the existing dwelling. The development will not be any closer to the site boundaries than existing. The gap between properties will be maintained, and the rear elevation is over 24 metres to the rear elevations of the neighbouring properties to the rear. So the next slide shows Existing and proposed, this is the front elevation. The proposed development includes the creation of a first floor above the existing ground floor. The height of the existing roof will be increased. The roof extension will be increased in two parts. The central gable ridge height will be increased by 3.2 metres and the eaves height increased by 800 mil. The side wing ridge height will be increased by 1.1 metres with no increase in eaves height. The ground floor will maintain the stone finish and the first floor will have an off-white painted rendered finish with composite cladding detailed to the front and grey colour framed aluminium windows and doors. So this is the rear elevation. So we've got the existing and we've got proposed. Something to note is that there are no windows within the rear elevation, first floor windows within the rear elevation. Then we have the existing west side elevation and the proposed west side elevation. And then we have the existing east side elevation and the proposed east side elevation. We've got existing and proposed floor plans to note that the floor plan doesn't increase in this part. Then we've got the proposed first floor plan. So the key matters for this application is design. The design approach and materials palette would add a contemporary feel to the remodelling and extension of the property. Existing residential developments within the surrounding wider area is fairly mixed in terms of age, style and type, and include both single-storey dwellings and two-storey dwellings. Oh God, my eyes are leaking. The surrounding neighbouring properties around the application site are two-storey dwellings. It is therefore considered the principle of a roof extension is acceptable as it would not significantly alter or harm the character and appearance of the wider area. The next key consideration is impact on neighbouring amenity. In terms of loss of light, the proposed development will impact on one window serving a utility room at St Edmunds, Sandy Lane Road. This window is for a non-habitable room. Apart from this window, the extension passed the light tests as set out within the Residential Alterations and Extensions SPD. With regard to overlooking and loss of privacy, no windows are proposed in the rear elevation and a suitably worded condition has been recommended to ensure any new windows require planning permission. Roof lights are proposed in the north side elevation, but will be well in excess of the 21 minimum distance normally sought to neighbouring windows. 3 roof lights are proposed in the south-east elevation that fail the 10.5 metre minimum distance normally sorted to the boundary. The large first floor bedroom window could result in overlooking, given the position of the neighbouring property, and therefore we suggest this is obscure glazed and non-opening. This can be secured by condition. The other 2 windows will not cause harm given their position within the roof and the relationship to the neighbouring property's side elevation. The proposed extension will be visible from neighbouring properties to the rear. However, given the plot sizes and distance to the neighbouring properties, it is not considered to cause an unacceptable overbearing impact. It is therefore considered that the proposed roof extension and roof lights will not cause an unacceptable loss of amenity to the surrounding neighbouring properties. And the last one is sustainability. No sustainability statement has been submitted which details key measures. This is regrettable. However, given the scale and type of proposal, this would not be reason to withhold planning permission. Last time. So the recommendation is to permit. Having considered all the relevant planning matters for the reasons discussed in the officer's report, the recommendation is to permit the application subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Victoria. We have 2 public speakers on this one. The first being Paul O'Neill, who is the applicant. You probably heard earlier that you have 5 minutes to speak, and I will remind you 30 seconds before you come to the end of your allowance. So if you would like to take your chair and press the button.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My wife and I want to improve our house, which has been empty for a considerable time before we bought it. We want to modernise and improve living conditions as it suffered condensation and damp issues. Opening up and increasing roof sizes will improve this. We note it is very popular to convert loft space in bungalows to improve room size. However, in order to do this, we have to raise the roof by a modest height to facilitate first floor accommodation. It is a modest increase and not a full two-storey extension. We are not increasing the property's footprint. We were mindful of our neighbours' privacy and therefore opted not to put windows directly at the back of the extension, but instead opted for roof lights placed at a distance not to cause unacceptable loss of privacy. Overall, we want to update the property and bring it up to modern living standards. We are also improving the landscape outside. This, we feel, will make it a suitable size family home for now and the future. We worked with our architect and the local planning officer who considered our plans and recommended for approval. I want to thank the committee and the chair for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Can I now ask Councillor Harvey to come forward and speak? Again, 5 minutes. You will be reminded.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm going to modify what I was going to say because I think I can read the room in terms of Councillor's thoughts on the climate change SPD. This is the second application tonight that has had no regard to a climate sustainability supplementary planning directive that was introduced by this council 3 years ago, which I fully support. And both applicants tonight, which I'm speaking to ask the refusal of, have not taken that supplementary advice into account at all. And officers admit that. So I'm wondering, really, whether I've missed something here, and I've not received a memo, because I'm very surprised that, you know, at the heart of our planning process, and successful applicants will align with the supplementary planning advice, and neither have done that tonight. And I'll state for the record, that really disappoints me. And I wasn't allowed to circulate my reasons for refusal on legal advice, which I apologise for trying to do that. I didn't know we couldn't do that. But my script has got reasons for refusal. First one I put forward tonight, at no point did my residents or myself say that they were complaining about the loss of a view. That was introduced by a councillor and then it's perpetuated. I told them specifically not to say you lose a view because that is not a planning reason, and they didn't say that. What happens is a big tall buildings go next to them and it will shadow their garden because it's to the south. It's the same with this one. The people at Withyholt Park have asked me to comment, not because of any intrusion by windows, but by the mass that's going up to the south of them, which will throw a shadow over their gardens. So I've really got a question, which I hope will be answered offline. There's loss of amenity to sitting in your garden has been hampered by you being put into the shade. So we're not allowed to sit in our gardens and have some sunshine, because that's what this boils down to in some respect. And it's the same with the Randolph Close one. At no point did the residents say they were interested in seeing the top of the roof. What they were saying was because this thing was going up so high and it's to the south, that their garden would lose sunlight. Not about, looking into the house, it's about losing sunlight. So is sunlight not an amenity? The right to sit in your garden, enjoy a barbecue in the sunshine? And all of a sudden you've got this thing going next. So I think this will overshadow 19, 20 and 21 Withyholt Park. I think it will be overbearing. I totally understand what my residents have said about why they're doing this for the house, but I've got other residents that have a different view. But again, I am disappointed that the supplementary climate sustainability planning advice has been completely put to one side, not just by officers, but also by the committee. I am really, really disappointed. And I'll close there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment on the sort of nature and enforceability of the climate change SPD. Just to clarify, the SPD does set out a number of sort of approaches in terms of reducing carbon emissions and asking for renewable energy and so on. But the way that the SPD is termed really is it encourages those measures. It doesn't demand them. So it is a supplementary planning document and it has the full weight of a supplementary planning document, but it doesn't set out any categoric fixed policies that must be complied with. It's a guidance document to encourage developers to go down that road. So as a planning authority, we're not in a position to insist that certain measures are put into place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Said so much better than I could have done, so thank you. Members' questions. Any member?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just clarify, was there a parish council objection to this?
No objection from the parish council. Okay.
No other questions from anybody? Councillor Bamford.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is a question or part of the debate, really. I just wanted to clarify, when looking from the perspective of the 3 houses that are affected by this, how much will the new raised roof impact over and above the further roof, which, as I understand it, is already significantly taller than the proposed new one? Does that make? Have I got that right? What I'm looking for is you don't understand? Okay. Can you clarify, Garth, or would you like me to have a go?
It is taller than the...
Yeah, so the roof behind the neighbouring property is a lot taller than the proposal. However, I don't have the measurements. I can't confirm that here, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. We'll go into member debate then. Any, Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, just on that last point, I think our view was that once you put the extra height on there, the view of the roof, and I know we're not actually talking view, but if you're talking about a building being imposing, I think it was felt that the roof of St Edmunds would still be visible. So, you know, it's not, and no other view would really be blocked from there, because the other piece, probably the most significant part of the roof, is only a metre or so taller, so will be barely visible. As far as the sustainable, you know, solar PV or that, normally I would be pushing for this, and if it was a new development, I'd want to push very hard. However, that roof line is probably almost exactly the same as my roof line. I've got solar panels. They went in 2008 and they haven't quite paid for themselves yet. So I can understand that, whereas I would probably still want to fit solar panels if that was my roof, I could understand fully why anyone wouldn't. The financial benefits would be very, very slim. And I could understand the argument for it not being reasonable.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor, oh God. Yes.
I'd just like to comment that the extra roof height doesn't seem very significant, really. And although I wasn't at the view, it's interesting to hear that the building behind, you can still see the roof. And given how far set back it is from the actual road itself, I don't think you can use any kind of argument that it's out of character with the, as nobody can see it from the actual road itself. So I would be supporting. I can't see any major planning reason to be against this.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Sorry for forgetting your name for a second. Any other member? Are you happy to go to the vote? I don't think there's anything for the officers to come back on there. We'll go to the vote then. In that case, the application is down for permit. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. So that is everybody voted, and it is 10 for, none against. So that has approved unanimously. Thank you. We're now moving on to 7D, which is the Imperial Garden Promenade. And it's Chris to introduce it to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for the erection of temporary structures in connection with festivals and special events, including an ice rink in Imperial Gardens. The proposal covers a maximum period of 75 days in each of the 3 winter seasons, 25-26, 26-27 and 27-28. This application is in addition to an existing planning permission for festivals and special events, which are held in Montpellier Gardens and Imperial Gardens, which was granted in 2013. And that's the permission which enables the various festivals to take place, the Jazz Festival and so on. So that was granted in 2013. A new application was submitted in 2022, seeking permission for a temporary ice rink to be sited in Imperial Gardens for the Christmas periods up until the most recent Christmas period. That application stated that hybrid fuel generators must be used to power the ice rink in 2022 and 2023, but then a direct electrical supply would then be used in 23-24 and 24-25. Members will recall that an application came to committee last year to amend that application to vary condition 5 to permit the use of a generator provided it was fueled by sustainably sourced hydro-treated vegetable oil, HVO, complemented by a battery. So the power supply, just for the avoidance of doubt, the power supply in this new application is proposed to be as that previously approved in the most recent application. So an HVO generator complemented by a high capacity battery. So moving on to the drawings, members will be familiar with the site on the western side of Imperial Gardens. The site's within the central conservation area with a number of grade 2 and grade 2 star listed buildings in the immediate vicinity, including the Town Hall, Queen's Hotel and various buildings on Imperial Square and the Promenade. So the application site is, as members know, to the south of the fountain there on the western side of the park. Just to remind members of the location, just some photos here of Imperial Gardens, just showing the general location. And again, a bit closer in here, showing the location of the ice rink, the proposed location of the ice rink, which is immediately in front of the viewer or the person taking the photo here on the left-hand side. Here's a photograph taken in 2021 showing the setup as it was then, and the proposal before members today is essentially the same or very similar. And again, here are some further photos from 23-24, so inside the structure, and then some photos at night there on the right-hand side. So the key planning matters are the design and the impact of the structures on heritage assets, impact on neighbouring amenity, sustainability and climate change, and then the public benefits. And going through those issues, as the application is for a temporary permission and for temporary structures, we don't have precise details of the proposed structures as these could vary as the scheme is worked up. However, the applicant has confirmed that the same supplier will be used, and therefore the setup will be similar to previous years in terms of scale, form and design. So that is a structure where the gables are translucent white PVC, the roof is a transparent PVC, and the side panels are made from glass, as shown in those photographs. It's temporary consent or a series of temporary periods. So officers raise no concerns in a general sense with the design and appearance of the structures. However, the conservation officer has concluded that there will be some harm as a result of these proposals on heritage assets, but this harm would be at the lower end of less than substantial, to use the terminology of the MPPF. It's the case that planning policy doesn't resist development that is harmful to heritage assets, provided that that harm is justified and provided that it is outweighed by the public benefits. So in this case, in terms of the public benefits, last year it's calculated that there was £530,000 of additional spend, so this is spend that only occurred as a result of the ice rink being there. It's also estimated that 37% of all visitors to the ice rink went on to undertake other activities within the town centre. And there's also the job creation aspect. The ice rink provided 22 local people with recruitment during its period of operation. So it's felt, officers' position really is that the public benefits of the proposal do outweigh the less than substantial harm to the designated heritage assets in this particular case. Finally, moving on to amenity, we've got no objection from environmental health. However, they have recommended a condition is imposed which would require the plant and the machinery and the equipment to be approved by the council each year before it's set up, so that the noise impact can be assessed. So the recommendation, as I say, is to permit the application subject to the following conditions. So a condition, obviously, ensuring that it is for a 3-year period or 3 separate occasions, compliance with a tree protection plan. As I say, the submission of equipment details and relevant noise assessment each year prior to assessment for the council's approval. The requirement that the generator shall only use hydrogenated vegetable oil, and then a condition requiring the restoration of the land following the deconstruction of the temporary structures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We don't have any public speakers, so are there any members' questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, the oil we're talking about, I guess palm oil would be a vegetable oil. I would be, quite honestly, I'd sooner see mineral oil used than palm oil. Do we know exactly what this oil will be?
I'm afraid I can't say whether palm oil is a vegetable oil, but what the application does say is that all of the oils will be sustainably sourced, and so that's part of the nature of the fuel.
Councillor Steinhardt?
I may have missed what you said, but you said there was less than potential harm. What was the harm you were referring to?
Thank you, Chair. It's harm on the setting of the listed buildings that surround the park, and the harm on the setting and character and appearance of the conservation area. So the conservation officer assessed that harm as being at the lower end of less than substantial, which is not a particularly useful terminology that's in the MPPF. So it is a very minimal level of harm, but nonetheless, it still has to be justified, and there has to be overriding public benefits to enable that harm to be policy compliant, which is the case in this case.
Councillor Andrews, sorry, is this a question? Sorry. Yeah.
Just going back to the conservation area officer and the less than substantial harm, is soil compaction being taken into account in that respect?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of that particular issue, having been an issue that's been something that's needed to be assessed by the case officer. All I can say really, Chair, is that the condition that requires the land to be reinstated to its former condition would obviously also apply to the flower beds and the grass to make sure that they're healthy post deconstruction of the structures.
Okay. Councillor Foster?
Is the surface actually ice or is it synthetic?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is. It is ice. Yeah.
Thank you. Open for discussion then. Any member? Councillor Allen?
feel I was in a race there with Councillor Arthur. No, I just wanted to say I completely agree with the officer's report on this one. I think everyone remembers what went down with 131 and my argument for that. And I think in this case, it still stands that the economic benefit that the ice rink brings to the town is incredible. And I think the ice rink is one of our best features in the winter. I think we would do well to keep on preserving that and to preserve the structure that contains it.
Councillor Oliver?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've supported this every time it's come to committee. The last few times we've been talking about, we can constantly talk about the power supply, and I'm pleased to see that they're still looking at it. Obviously, the additional supply, an extra 650,000 is not sustainable. It'd be interesting to see how their investigations into surplus supplies being harnessed. Hopefully that'll come up before the end of this next 3 years. But I shall be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, in the absence of Councillor Fisher, I ought to. No, I still want to put in my objection to the fact that I think it was well before COVID we were talking about putting in a main supply, and we're still talking about it. Yes, it's expensive, but I still want it on record that I'm rather disappointed that we haven't got this sorted by now.
Thank you for that. Councillor Foster?
I don't know if anyone's considered that as winters are getting milder and milder, it will cost more and more, we'll have more and more emissions to freeze the ice. And I actually think that the benefits could be met with a roller rink that would use far less energy and be just as much fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Andrews?
I don't know if I missed it. Are we still on questions? Or no, we're okay, sorry.
So, you have a question, yes?
We have moved on. No, we're not on questions. Right, okay. Yeah, I've got to say, I'm still extremely disappointed about the power supply issue with this. And we're being asked to okay for another 3 years without a guarantee of that power grid coming into place. And in terms of the restoration, every time I go into Imperial Gardens and Montpellier Gardens to a degree, but less so with but more so with Imperial Gardens, the returfing isn't taking every time. It isn't taking as well as the time before. That is fairly obvious, and I do worry about soil compaction. We've got 3 whole years, and winter is the time when traditionally those gardens would regenerate, the lawns would regenerate. So I think on ecological grounds, I'm minded against this, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I think we do rely on the officers and the council to ensure that the surface is repaired to their satisfaction. And so we as far as I'm aware, we haven't had any concerns from those officers in the past. So I don't know. Do you want to come back?
I'm not saying they do a fantastic job from what they've got, but I do think 3 years every winter sticking this structure on top of that Imperial Gardens, I do think we're going to have to look at completely redoing the gardens after this. I'm pretty sure, looking at what I'm seeing, that soil is more compacted than it has been in the past. That's not to say that Parks and Gardens do as good a job as they could possibly do in repairing it, but winter is the time where that grassland does regenerate.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
I think Councillor Andrews raises a fair point about the compaction, but I also think in terms of noticeable amenity for the community, it's not substantial enough to merit refusal in this instance. And I would, given it's been bracketed under heritage and amenity for the community, I still think the economic benefits outweigh any potential ecological, I won't say even say harm in this case, I'd say inadequacies.
Thank you. Any other member? Happy to go to the vote? The recommendation is for permit. So all those in favour, please show either against or for. So we've got 8 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. So that is approved. So thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the item 8, which is the appeals update for note. I hope everybody has got that. And the final thing I think I'm supposed to do is to no, well, we haven't, item 9, no, there aren't any other items that require a decision, so I will close the meeting, and the next extraordinary meeting will be on the 29th of May, which is the Elms Park one. So I hope everybody's had a chance to work out what they're doing on that. Well, I think Rian has put out a list of all the requirements from us, so hopefully every member's.
Shall we close the meeting before we?
Sorry, yeah, I close the meeting.